Once again, the battle lines are being drawn between the U.S. government and big tobacco. This time, the fight is over menthol cigarettes. Menthols account for more than a quarter of the entire cigarette market, and the Biden administration wants to ban them and flavored cigar products. For the president, this fight goes back a dozen years to when he was vice president. Probably goes back further than that. He's always been a nanny state kind of guy. But in 2009, the Food and Drug Administration banned flavored cigarettes like cherry and clove, which appeal to younger smokers. But it left a big exception for menthols. Now, tobacco companies have long marketed menthol to black smokers, and the marketing seems to be working for the most part. The FDA says 85% of black smokers choose menthol cigarettes. The tobacco firms say they have evidence to counter the FDA proposal. And besides, they say criminalizing menthol would have all sorts of unintended consequences. The ACLU kind of backs that argument, saying that it would lead to unconstitutional policing of black smokers. Well, here to clear the smoke over this issue is Jacob Rich of Reason Foundation and Adam Coleman, founder of Wrong Speak Publishing and author of Black Victim to Black Victor. Guys, thank you both for joining to talk about this. First, Jacob, where does this effort stand, and how does the Biden administration go about banning menthol cigarettes from being available on shelves? What is the mechanism you pull to do that?
Well, the mechanism is already in place. You just brought up the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, which outright banned flavored cigarettes, which at the time I think were less than 5% of the entire cigarette market, so it wasn't even that big of a deal. But one thing that was written, a very small sentence, was that if the FDA finds it advantageous to public health in order to ban menthol cigarettes, like there'd be some sort of good public health outcome afterwards, they may move forward in doing so. After Obama, Trump took over. And the FDA did not feel that the president was going to support their efforts, which is all reserved under the executive branch. So they definitely need presidential authority and approval before they go forward with anything. And now that Biden is president, the FDA now thinks that the president is going to support it. And he is. So now that Biden is president, the Tobacco Control Act is being leveraged to get rid of menthol. And the FDA has the authority. It's already been passed by Congress, and there's really nothing anyone can do about it other than take it to court and probably lose.
Adam, a lot of the conversation about this has immediately become centered around race. We were talking just in the lead up to this about the racial dynamics of smokers, and at least 3 in 4 black smokers smoke menthol cigarettes. Is that something that you see in your own life and circles, and is that something that you think needs to be factored into the discussion?
Personally, I don't really know too many people who actually smoke in general, to be honest with you. I think more and more Americans are smoking less.
Neither do I.
So the smoking agenda, to rid of it kind of seems like, why are they doing it now? I'm always curious about that. But as far as black Americans, you already know the numbers, the percentage of black Americans that smoke menthol. I think it's more of a cultural reason. It's repeated behavior from one generation to the next generation of just smoking habits, especially if it's trendy or if it's cool. If your father, your mother smokes these particular cigarettes, you're more likely to smoke those, and it just perpetuated beyond there. So as far as how it deals with when it comes to black Americans or even targeting black Americans as the reason why to ban it, I have more of a problem with that, utilizing black people as the reason the federal government needs to step in on a consistent basis. And this is just one of many examples.
And that seems to be the framing. I mean, the main episode that we were talking about earlier today is sort of like white paternalism, white savior complex, and like that this might be coming from the same kind of thinking. It's like, well, there's a disproportionate amount of black victims of lung cancer or whatever smoking-related illnesses, so we need to target the thing that is causing that, which in this case would be menthol cigarettes. But you've told me before that like menthol cigarette marketing doesn't appear to even be working anymore. Not many people smoke, particularly young black people.
Mm-hmm. So yes, just about 2% of young black people smoke, people in youth in high school. And that's relative to over 4% of white people. So you can already see that as a proportion of the population, double the amount of white people are smoking. So saying that we need to target menthol cigarettes in order to do something about disproportionate harm relative to other races is absolutely false with youth. And even with adults, less black people smoke than white people. But I can tell you exactly why they're trying to leverage this narrative to go after menthol cigarettes. It actually really has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the plan that the tobacco control activists, the public health activists have in order to rid all tobacco products from the market. If you saw in 2009, they banned flavored cigarettes, right?
Yep.
Well, that had nothing to do with flavored cigarettes really introducing youth to cigarettes. Youth were almost always introduced with either regular cigarettes.
There was an imaginary epidemic of kindergartners smoking strawberry cigarettes behind their school.
Exactly. But the tobacco controllers are incredibly smart. What they do is they go after the tobacco products that have the smallest constituency, because they're going to have the least amount of resistance to ban the product if fewer people are using them. So we got rid of flavored cigarettes that had the smallest constituency. What's next? What has about 25% of the market? That's menthol. So because they know they probably won't be successful going after regular cigarettes is why they're going after menthol. And they're just using race as an excuse.
What is going to happen when this is actually put into effect? I know this has been done in Canada, this has been done in the EU. Do you see a meaningful drop in the behavior that is trying to be curbed? Or do people do what they kind of, I think, always do, which is they just find other ways to get the same product, they go to different sources, and then you also then have it labeled as criminal behavior? Because I think the ACLU argument is that, like, you're gonna have more Eric Garners, right? Like, this was the guy who was killed by a cop for selling Lucy cigarettes. You're gonna have more of that kind of thing going on if this is now a criminalized activity that people are gonna engage in anyways.
Absolutely. If we go forward with a ban on menthol cigarettes, there will be a reduction in use. If you increase the price to consume a product, which banning a product is the ultimate way of increasing the price, right? You will see some sort of reductions, and the literature suggests that there will probably be about a 10 to 20% reduction in smoking among menthol consumers when that happens. But that is a trade-off, right? We're trading a not huge, but at least measurable reduction in smoking among menthol smokers for a multi-billion-dollar black market and much more events where police are confronting black people with products that are now illegal. And I don't think that's a fair trade-off.
Part of this discussion that sort of eludes me is the bit about who smokes what and why. It is unclear to me why you said like 4% of whites smoke, right? And then it's 2%.
Youth. High school youth.
White youth smoke. So in some of the discussion I've seen on this, like the Washington Post was running a story about like who is disproportionately impacted, and it was like poverty, right? And being black are connected. Therefore, they're going to smoke more because smoking is a stress relief activity. Therefore, it's racialized. But it doesn't get talked about when you're looking at the broader amount of smokers who are white. And if that is the metric for addressing this as some sort of crisis, why don't they just ban all cigarettes? Just take them all off the market for the public health and the public good.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Obviously, the most effective measure if you're going to try to reduce the consumption of any product is to outright ban it. But one thing that public health officials really haven't acknowledged is that because disproportionately more youth and adults smoke regular cigarettes, if they were to ban regular cigarettes and force everybody to smoke menthol instead, they would actually see much larger reductions in smoking than banning menthol. And when you consider that narrative...
So you give somebody, you take normal cigarettes off the market,
yes,
only allow for menthols.
Yes.
Majority of people over on net would say no thank you to that because they don't like the taste?
It could be the majority, but it's definitely much larger of a percentage than menthol users switching to regular. If you talk to regular cigarette smokers and you offer them a menthol, chances are they'll say, ew. No. And that's because most people think menthol are disgusting, and that's why it's only 25% of the market share.
But not black Americans. Like black Americans, by and large, the ones who smoke, the ones who are inclined to inhale smoke into their bodies, prefer menthol. And what is absent from the discussion seems to me to be like the actual consumer preference. Everybody says that this is about propaganda, that black consumers and black smokers They picked it up from their communities picked it up from each other, and then they picked it up from generations before them, and it all goes back to the tobacco companies and, you know, advertisements in the 70s of cool, you know, race abolitionists with afros smoking Newports, and like that's the beginning, and it all just goes forward from there. Nothing about what people actually want to smoke.
Well, I mean, that could be the origin as far as the marketing campaign. To be honest with you, I'm not fully sure, but I think most things that happen with us has more to do with behaviorally. You know, who do we adapt from? More likely the people who surround us, our parents. If they smoked, we're more likely to smoke. We already know these particular things. So if it's already within the culture, and I can speak as far as Black culture, we like to associate certain things with being part of our culture. So, you know, speaking a certain way, dressing a certain way, the type of music, there are associations with being Black. So it's even more than it's part of the culture. It's about being this. You know, if you do this, you are Black. Yeah. You know, so if you're going to take up smoking cigarettes, are you going to smoke the non-Black cigarettes or the Black cigarettes? You know, these are kind of unconscious things that people don't really think about, but menthol cigarettes are associated with Black people, so you're going to more likely.
There seems to be a point there, like about the whole idea of manufactured consent. I think that's the Noam Chomsky critique of media, that we all sort of live in a society where we think we have signed off and consented to certain things and certain norms, but we have been pushed, we have been nudged and groomed to think a certain way. We confuse free will for the ways in which we are like programmed by our society to think and want certain things. I take the point there as far as smoking goes.
Yeah, and I would as well. And there's this notion out there that menthol cigarette advertising is predatory. Well, guess what? All advertising is predatory. All advertising is to maximize the sales of whatever product. And when it comes to menthol advertising versus regular cigarette advertising, well, menthol is failing relative to regular cigarette because higher percentage of the white population smokes relative to the Black population. So relatively, the marketing for regular cigarettes must be more predatory or at least successful. So trying to use that to leverage these bans doesn't really seem consistent with the behaviors that are actually put forward.
Is there any evidence that menthol cigarettes are more dangerous?
No. In fact, menthol smokers tend to smoke about 1/3 to 50% less cigarettes a year than regular smokers.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not quite sure. It might actually be because regular cigarettes are more dangerous. I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, if more people in the United States among all age groups are smoking regular cigarettes and choose to smoke regular cigarettes, it doesn't surprise me that those smokers also tend to smoke more of them. The product that's preferred is the one that's consumed more relative to the other products. So I'm not exactly sure the mechanisms for why that is, but it's quite clear in the data that menthol smokers smoke less.
Guys, I appreciate you coming on, shedding some light on this issue. I guess we are headed towards a future in which menthol cigarettes are unavailable on the market. Like, this is going to happen, right, in the next couple of years?
Yes. So if the Biden administration continues another 4 years after this term, I would suspect that it's going to be successful. The J.R. Reynolds and some of the other tobacco companies are going to sue and try to stop this. But it's quite clear that it's written into law that this is allowed to happen. Congress has already spoke. So probably the only thing that could stop this is if a Republican took over and decided to defend smokers.
Jacob Rich, Reason Foundation. Adam, nice to have you guys both here.
Thank you.
Thank you.